Hey all, as you requested, based on the comments of yesterday's video, I'm going to talk about the EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2 description of your choice. Controversy, backtrack, raging garbage fire, what have you. The descriptor is yours to add. But I deliberately did that video yesterday on problem solving and conflict resolution, and I highly suggest you go back and watch that before this one, because I'm going to use it because it yields some interesting results. Now, for people who don't know what this controversy is, I'm going to identify the issue, and I'm going to do it very briefly. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here. EA has a uniquely bad reputation as a video game publisher. They keep done effing it up, to use a colloquialism. They have engendered a lot of ill will among gamers for various controversies, not including the Mass Effect Andromeda mess, the retake Mass Effect controversy back in the day, a lot of other things connected to Mass Effect, and in general, just acting like their consumer base is the gum on the bottom of their shoe instead of people who spend money, thereby funding their profits. And that is just the general opinion. I'm not getting into whether or not this is true or whether or not this is fair. This is the identifying the issues part. That's the opinion of not just gamers, but in general. It's really easy to rag on EA, to bash EA, to drag on them, because, you know, it's been voted the most hated company in America. I don't know how many years running. Then there's the other side where EA claims that games are getting more and more expensive to produce, that there's certain things that they have to do to avoid an outright price increase that they claim there is no consumer tolerance for. I somewhat disagree, but more on that in a bit. The issue here is that, I don't know if you guys have played these sorts of games, you probably have, where there's certain characters that are locked at the beginning of the game, and then you earn some sort of in-game currency to unlock them as it goes along. In this case, it was the heroes you get in Battlefronts. One of the most fun parts of the Battlefronts franchise, Battlefronts, I always forget if it's singular or plural, but one of the most fun parts is you play as sort of, you know, this rank and file disposable rando character, but then you accumulate enough points during the match and ta-da, some epic hero appears on the field. I was always happy when it was Yoda back in the original day. I was like, Yoda, I'm Yoda. You know, I love Yoda like way too much. But, you know, you got to play as one of the named characters from a Star Wars franchise, and they had extra powers and everything like that. And there was a very funny moment. This is a digression, but I loved it, so I want to share during the E3 press conference, the demonstration for Battlefront 2, where Rey appeared on the field and got killed in like 5 seconds, and everybody on Twitch, everybody on Twitter went, "That's more realistic than The Force Awakens." It was pretty funny, but that's sort of the way the game works, and the way you unlock the cool shit. It's a feature that a lot of people like. Well, they made the characters people want to play, Darth Vader being the really critical one. You don't mess with Darth Vader, man, and Star Wars fans. That you're gonna get everybody from 50-year-old dudes to 8-year-old girls mad at you if you mess with Darth Vader. But they made him, and I believe it was Luke Skywalker, so ridiculously time-consuming to unlock. The in-game currency level was so high that it would take 40 hours to unlock them, and that is the amount of time a lot of people spend on an entire game, not just unlocking a single character. And one thing led to another. There was a revolt on Reddit It's a day ending in Y. Someone was mad on Reddit about something. But EA responded, and it then became the most downvoted post ever on Reddit. And so EA backtracked, lowered the amount of credits it took to unlock these popular characters, and now it's something like 10 to 15 hours instead of 40 hours, which is still a large chunk of time, but doable, right? It's still an achievement. Because one of the things about this unlockable stuff in games that if you're not familiar with, you have to understand, there's an element of bragging rights, of being able to show off that you've earned this stuff. And that's an ongoing point of contention between players and EA on this subject, that, okay, you made it easier, but there's still no reward for actual skill. It's a reward for putting a lot of time into the game, because the way the game kind of divvies out XP, for lack of a better term, I don't know, it's crystals and points and star cards and all this stuff. And I'm like, can we just please use XP and points and make this really simple, like just standardized language? People fight about, like, I'm going to say XP, okay? But the XP is rewarded basically for showing up. It's a participation medal instead of doing really cool stuff in game. That's the ongoing complaint. But the interesting bit of news on this, and another reason I waited, was to see the backtrack and then how people responded to the backtrack. And what's interesting is that gamers are not treating the backtrack like any sort of victory. They're treating the backtrack as proof EA is shady. And that's the part I find really interesting. And that's the thing why I'm like, okay, the 7 steps to problem solving. EA, my take on this is EA responded to the intense unpopularity of their initial response. They changed it based on that. They didn't change it based on understanding the actual interests of the people who were unhappy. And to me, my understanding is, first of all, one, it's Star Wars. There's an extra burden on a developer when you make a game that involves a beloved licensed property, and there are very few IPs more beloved than Star Wars. Don't screw up Star Wars. The unique ethos of Star Wars, of the Jedi being expected to sacrifice and to trust their feelings, and light overcoming dark and all this stuff, and even somebody as evil as Darth Vader having good in them and being redeemed. People really buy into that stuff. And when you mess with that, they kind of lose their minds. And that was one element that I'm bringing up because of I'm hesitant to get in this because someone said that there were 7 death threats leveled against a developer. Now, I have not seen the actual nature of these alleged death threats. And I say alleged because there is no, how do I put this? There is no agreed upon bar in gaming or on the internet in general as to what constitutes a death threat. Someone treat "you should die" as a death threat. I don't. In order to say something's a death threat, it needs to be criminal. Go kill yourself is incredibly rude and awful, and you shouldn't do it, but it is not a death threat. You should die is not a threat. A threat involves some credible indicator that they could actually do it. If somebody who knows where you live and they send you something saying, you better lock your door and look over your shoulder, I'm going to end you. That's a direct quote of what somebody said to me who knew where I lived. Yeah, that's a threat. But some rando on the internet The issue with this is the more you publicize this, the more people do it. And making that part of the story, I think, encourages more people to go out and do things that do not rise to the standard of illegal behavior or even something that will necessarily get your Twitter account banned. And so by playing this up, we're actually encouraging more of it, which is why I don't like jumping on that bandwagon. I think that our anti-trolling and our anti-harassment policies in general in this industry suck donkey balls. Or suck bantha balls, because we're talking about Star Wars. And yeah, that's a really gross. The balls on that weird pig thing that was drinking in the drinking fountain during episode 7, those balls, they suck those. They're bad. They actually, I think, encourage and perpetuate and make worse the amount of harassment that certain people face, because they're rewarding the behavior. Oh, look, you spooked them enough for them to say something. You became important. And this is an interest of gamers that companies like EA fail to understand. Companies like EA have made rank and file gamers feel like they do not matter, like their opinions and their happiness and their satisfaction in their products does not matter. All that matters is they continue to pay the nerd stupid tax whenever Star Wars is branded on something. And I say this because the media in general, the games press, dropped the ball again on the original Battlefront. I didn't. I was like, this game is way too behind closed doors. I'm not seeing terribly much to get excited by. Okay, it's really pretty, but they didn't have to do any design. They were handed, you know, here's a trooper, here's a battle droid, simple. All the designs were done for them. They just had to render them in-game. The game itself was rather shallow, and there wasn't terribly much to do. The old Battlefront games on the PSP that I played were a deeper experience, and even those they got a pass because they were portable, but they were considered significantly inferior to the base, you know, computer product or console product or whatever it was. I'm blanking at the moment. And so they're already coming from behind on this. They already have to do a make good on the sequel. And yet they're relying heavily on these loot boxes that I don't like. Loot boxes. I want to know how much an item I want in a game costs, accumulate the points, and go buy it. I don't want a random drop that randomly awards it. Again, I want to get the thing I want that I think is cool based on skill, not something the game decided to reward me based on an alleged chance algorithm, but it's really not completely chance because they can set how often certain gear drops. And so it ends up taking a lot longer to earn these things because it's chance. I have a friend who plays Destiny, and she's constantly like, she's grinding and grinding and grinding to try to get this item that she wants, but it's a random loot drop. And I think that certain things, if somebody really wants an item, if somebody thinks it looks really cool or they want it for whatever reason, they should be able to get it based on an investment of time, because that's what makes somebody feel connected. The feeling that something is random does not form an emotional connection with the player. A reward for doing good does. If people feel like they're just being rewarded for showing up, it creates not a dissonance, but a distance, kind of an emptiness, a gulf between the player and a game. And that's what things like these loot crates, these loot boxes, these random gacha drops do. Not gotcha, gacha. You know, the Japanese buy a package, open it up, it's a random toy inside. And the Japanese apparently love those. Western audiences not so much, and Star Wars is a Western property. So we have to keep that in mind. This isn't an import. This isn't partaking in somebody else's cultural point. This is EA, which is an American company with an American property, you know, that is going to be a massive thing at the theaters this winter. And let's face it, this game is going to get a pretty massive boost because it's tied to a numbered Star Wars film coming out in theaters. And that brings me to this point of EA's interests and why it is harder for me to be as sympathetic to them. EA claims that the reason they need these features and the reason they design them the way they is because games are increasingly expensive to make, as I said before, and they have to make money. EA is highly profitable despite some missteps, and they are making it sound like they are constantly at risk of their doors closing. I understand that is what they believe. But if you cannot turn a Star Wars game into a license to print money, you are doing something wrong, precisely because that really expensive part of games, the thing that makes it so expensive, is that art design, the assets. Somebody have to go in there and build all those things. You don't have to design a stormtrooper or whatever they're calling it now, an Imperial trooper, whatever the frack it is. You don't have to design a battle droid. It's already done for you. Part of the reason you purchase an IP is those things are locked in. You are just copying. You are taking it, you are rendering it with your code to work with your game. You are building it. And yes, that takes time and that takes manpower, but that is not the same as hiring artists to do 8 different designs and winnow it down to 1 and then do that and create 5 more based on that. And that is a time-consuming, expensive process, and you keep going back to the drawing board. That's why the phrase is going back to the drawing board. Okay, that's where it comes from, that process. It's not the same. EA is getting such a massive savings just by not having to do any of that design. And art is the most expensive part of the game design process right now. And yes, it's 4K assets and all this stuff, and we can talk about the merits of 4K and whether this leap to 4K is really serving the consumer, whether it's too soon. That's a discussion for another time. The question is now, are they really at risk of losing money on this game? I don't think so. I don't think that's EA's interest in this case. Acquiring a license like Star Wars by a studio by EA is not about breaking even. It's about maximizing profits. Because don't forget, EA is a publicly traded company. So unlike Ubisoft, they can go and be very crazy in French the way they tend to be. And you guys know I love them for that. And Ubisoft, because they are still mostly, you know, they're not publicly traded. There are shareholders and everything like that. They're fighting off a hostile takeover. The reason they want to fight that off is if they want to lose their shirts on a game, they can. They can make that decision internally. They are empowered to do that. EA isn't. And EA's shareholders are expecting a huge haul. They are expecting their loot drop because of a Star Wars game. And this was a problem with the Old Republic game that did well, but everybody talked about it like it was a horrid failure because EA wanted a WoW killer and it was never going to be a WoW killer. Once it tweaked the monetization model, the game did exceptionally well. It was profitable, but it wasn't the big smash hit they wanted. And somebody who should by rights still be at EA and I think should be in the CEO job right now, Rami Zika, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, but one of the former heads of BioWare, he lost his job. He left gaming because of the Old Republic debacle, because it didn't make enough money. And now we're on the other side of this, and there's been a change in management at EA since then. They claim they've learned their lesson. They claim they're turning a new leaf. They claim they're listening. And here we are again. It wasn't that long since Mass Effect Andromeda that was another clear example of cutting corners because some higher up wanted to go do something the gamers didn't especially care about and neglected something they did care about. Here we are again. Now, I don't want to make it sound like keeping your shareholders happy is no big deal. It's a very big deal. in a publicly traded company. But let's be honest about this. This isn't about breaking even on a game. This is about an internally set expectation of how many gobs and gobs and gobs of money this Star Wars game is going to make. And publicly traded companies tend to make short-term decisions to keep their shareholders happy quarter to quarter instead of long-term decisions that will keep their core consumers happy to build up a good reputation so it's easier for them to make money in the long term. This is the difference between Ubisoft, who's had its stumbles along the way, but isn't anywhere near as loathed, or a better example, somebody like Blizzard or Bungie, who they screw up all the time. They have a rabidly loyal fan base. You know, they can put out a game, Overwatch is out, rah! You know, everybody just descends on it. They don't have to do these crazy marketing campaigns. That's their second wave. Their early adopters make that thing into a rocket, right? Destiny was heavily, heavily flawed, the first one. But it made gobs and gobs of money. And Destiny 2, they made it better. And so everybody's like, all right, we can forgive Destiny 1 kind of sort of having a crappy campaign and you broke the crucible and all this stuff. Destiny 2 is an improvement. We see an improvement. You guys listened. We don't have the same relationship with EA. So that's what's important to understand. Gamers aren't interested in a developer being perfect. Bethesda would be way out of business if that were true, with all the bugs in their Fallout games. They want to know that a developer is interested in improving based on feedback from their community. And that's what EA has failed to communicate with its backtrack. Because while they were like, okay, we've heard you, we're changing it, they still had the "we got death threats," which is kind of playing the victim. Not "you really, really angered people." And then I get, "But Leanna, you're saying that it's okay to do that." And it's not a question of being okay or not being okay. It's a question of recognizing that when it's something like Star Wars, which for some people, and you can think this is pathetic as you want, but this is just true. Something like Star Wars is the only reason some people get up in the morning. It gets them out of bed. It's a coping mechanism. You mess with that, they lose their minds and say things they don't even really mean because they don't know how to express their anger effectively. That does not make a person violent. That does not make a person dangerous. That makes a person angry. You still shouldn't do it. We should still be going, can you find another way to say that? But that's a one-on-one dialogue, not going, I got death threats. You know, you guys know I've done this on this channel. And this is funny because we're still at step 2 of this process because the solutions, well, we already have the solution and this is the problem. They got too connected to a solution. They got too attached to a solution and they just jumped on it, in part because it was easy. Now, changing the payout level was part of the solution, right? But in their evaluation, somebody should have recognized, like, look, guys, we need to do more than this. We need to recognize that we messed up. And because just lowering the cap only addresses one of gamers' interests in this matter. Now, the long-term solution is to change the way these games are monetized completely. And we really have to have a discussion of whether or not multiplayer needs to be a value add, kind of like Call of Duty did it. That they were like, well, if, you know, the whole seasons pass structure, that somebody said the season pass was too expensive on the original Battlefront. Yeah, it was. It was really pricey. A season pass should be $10. It should not be $50. Like, that's nuts. You're not going to make $50 a player on loot crates. You need proper pricing and actually allow people to pay for the features they want, not the right to be entered in a draw. Like, hey, you get to spin the wheel for your overpriced crystals or whatever like that. If these games cost more to make, if they do, we as an industry need to seriously start talking about the reality of a price increase. Now, I do think there is an issue there. Games are too expensive. There's a psychological barrier at $100, and we are creeping up on that. When you say games are $60, they're really not, because of state, local, and federal sales taxes. Here, it's 13% on top of, up here, it's $79.99. So Canadian gamers are paying $80, and we're still buying games. If it's good, we're just hesitating more. If this is an ongoing problem, we cannot continue to treat gamers with this loot crate system. It's not the ideal model. They keep saying it is. But gamers are saying, no, it's not. Unfortunately, there's an attitude in this industry that gamers really don't know what they want. They don't actually reward the things they claim to want. Well, companies like Blizzard and Bungie prove that wrong. These are two of the most beloved companies in the industry. They at least act like they listen to their community. They may be still doing analytics, but they're much better at faking it, if that's true, right? They don't yell at their community. They don't scold their community. Instead, EA is being lauded by the games press. I'm going to show you two articles to sort of close, because this is getting up in the half hour, and you know that I like to keep it under. This is a good article if you want to learn more about it. I've kind of given my opinion, but I really liked this article. It's on The Verge. I'll link to it. This is a really good examination of, as you see, the limitation of the loot boxes issue. I think this is a responsible, nuanced, well thought out look at the issue that actually creates a productive dialogue going forward. And you can go ahead and read it. You see, they mention the death threats and the most downvoted comment in the history of Reddit, and then you can tweak it. But it's a pretty good article. You notice they didn't put the death threats in the title. It's a pretty good article, but then we jump over to Polygon. Of course, why your Battlefront 2 outrage is a compliment to EA and how to use it effectively. Based on the author, this should be no surprise, but this is a terribly condescending article. And this is the mistake the games press keeps making in trying to defend these publishers who, the thing about EA, they dole out press access like alms for the poor, and certain companies who have it lick EA's boots so that they can continue to have it, because it is hard to get and it is hard to keep, and they can cancel at any time. But the first thing about the developer or publisher has information you don't is irrelevant. The developer or publisher has information the individual gamer doesn't give a rat's ass about. The individual gamer who really, really hates a feature doesn't care if anybody else loves it. For me, it's the dialogue wheel on Mass Effect. I hate that thing. I don't care how many times people insist that most people prefer it. I don't like it. And because games are about choice and games are about creating different experiences for different people, that is a strike against me buying future Mass Effect games. Always had it, but Dragon Age games, I hated that it affected Dragon Age. It pissed me off, and it made me like the franchise less. This idea of people are complaining about something, but it never changes. It's good evidence that, oh, well, you'll still pay for it. That ain't good. And then the most powerful message from your wallet. You are completely out of touch if you think telling someone just don't buy a Star Wars game is going to work. It's Star Wars. Star Wars is not just a franchise. It is the franchise of people my age and younger. It is a cultural phenomenon. People put Jedi on their census as their religion. It is completely out of touch to say just don't buy a Star Wars game. It is a sacred trust when you acquire the Star Wars license. And I might go on more about Feedback Friday about how this is an indication that Disney has to go back to making their own games. And I know it won't happen, but I don't even have time to get into that. But oh my God, Disney, You made good games. The studios you formulated to make games made good games. Go back to making games. I know you don't consider yourself a games company. You consider yourself a feature film and IP company with a side of television. But please go back to first party, because we're stuck with shit. Or give your stuff to Ubisoft. Give your licenses to Ubisoft, who at least seems to give a crap about the user experience, okay? Like, this partnership with EA and Disney, the ethos of the two companies is just not compatible. It's just not, and no amount of money in the world is going to change that. So this idea of, if you don't like a Star Wars game, don't buy it. And I say this as somebody who doesn't buy Battlefronts because I don't think the games are very good. That is not fair. Because if this is your opportunity to play in a Star Wars sandbox, this is the only opportunity you have to play in a Star Wars sandbox. That is entitled as shit. It doesn't understand the deep connection that people have to this particular franchise. And what a sacred trust franchises like this, like Batman, like Spider-Man are. You take this on, you have more responsibility on you to make this game quality. But I know I'm going over time, but let's continue. Don't cross lines of basic human decency. I've already addressed this. Easy to say, hard to do. People say things when they're angry. This, I think, is an interesting perspective, and this is something, as much as I just crapped on everything, this is the one comment in this that I think it's important that people should know this. Rage is kind of a compliment, and publishers know this. This is 100% true. Publishers like EA see gamers freaking out as kind of amusing. Oh, they care. This is how gamers express caring. And as much as this article is a complete shill for EA, and once again, Polygon insisting that gamers are just, oh, you're not the people that matter. These great people that make these amazing products, they're the ones that matter because they're the ones that'll kick us out if we don't kiss their ass, right? There's something to that. And this is why reading stuff you don't agree with can sometimes be of value. It's true. I have seen publishers actually flat out laugh at the anger, and EA is one of them. I mean, I completely agree with EA telling homophobes where to stuff it when it comes to gay characters in Mass Effect. I support that decision. It is fair to take a badge of pride when you are doing something like that, saying we are going to support the LGBTQ plus community. We're still making money, so we can. That's not the same as saying you're unhappy with the quality of a Star Wars product. Oh, that's a compliment. No, it's really not. And I know we talk about this a lot on our channel. When people are getting so angry that you can't have a conversation, that's not good. Everybody needs to calm down enough that we can have a conversation. And right now, when we hit the point where things that are or are not death threats start flying around, that is not productive. And so, no, it's not a compliment. And this is the problem, is that publishers think that people flying into rages is a good thing. They shouldn't be treating it that way. They should have a system in place that people can feel heard without turning into flaming assholes. Because the only thing that seems to work nowadays is people acting like flaming assholes. So publishers are encouraging people to act like horrible pieces of garbage on the internet so they get heard. And then they claim they care about harassment. Doesn't work that way. They're perpetuating it. So that's my take. The idea that backlash is showing that franchises are relevant in the short term, and EA's thinking is very short term, but in the long term, gamers tend to work fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on you, fool me 3 times, shame on you, fool me 4 times, no, I've moved on to play Destiny. And that's the thing that this attitude of people are invested enough to get mad in doesn't get. People can only stay mad for so long. After a while, being mad is boring. And when they get bored, they move on. We saw that with Halo. People, remember the days where people would, oh God, the crap I got when Halo 3, I only gave it an 8 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10. The hordes descended, right? And I was like, what? 8 out of 10's good. Not good enough. Had to be perfect. That's how diehard people were about Halo. They've now moved on to Destiny because Destiny's the new hotness. Halo's cold and old. Everything has its time. If you burn out Star Wars, people will care less about Star Wars. And that is the big concern with this IP. Disney is trying to manage it responsibly, but the problem is that they have done these deals with license holders. There is only so much control they can have over the quality of the product that a license holder like EA puts out. And this is why Disney needs their own game studio again. I'm telling you, Disney needs their own game studio again. I know it's not as profitable for Disney, but Disney also cares about quality, so Disney needs its own game studio again, because in the long term, creating quality product is better for your bottom line, because then you get those consistent people. Because that's the thing about Disney, like what they do or not, their quality of service on their brand extensions is incredible. Their theme parks, their cruises, anything like that. You pick up and talk to Disney on the phone. They're the nicest freaking people in the world. And that matters. And the fact that that experience is so different with EA is going to matter because it puts a little bit of tarnish on an otherwise gleaming brand. And I'm going to stop there because I went over time, but there will probably be more on this on Feedback Friday. Maybe not. I may have to do 2 Feedback Friday videos just because it's gone in 2 completely different directions this week. But I'm going to stop. Thanks for watching. If you're wondering what this is, it's some sort of sticker for my new battery backup, and I was just playing with it because it was here. But sorry about that. That was probably distracting. All right, thanks for watching.